inshallah, as usual, the summary of the Friday sermon, the khutbah was delivered by our Sheikh, Dr. May Allah reward him. The theme of the khutbah is basically fulfilling obligations or keeping promises. Al-Wafa'u bil'ahd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran al-Kareem, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, وَأَوْفُوا بِالْعَهْدِ إِنَّ الْعَهْدَ كَانَ مَسْئُولًا. And fulfill obligations, so keep your promises. Because promises are something, obligations are something that you will be questioned about. Again, Allah says, وَأَوْفُوا بِعَهْدِي أُوفِي بِعَهْدِكُمْ وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونِ. Addressing people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَوْفُوا بِعَهْدِي, and fulfill your obligations towards me. That keep your promises between me and you. أُوفِي بِعَهْدِكُمْ, and I shall keep my promises towards you. In other words, worship me as you ought to do, and I shall reward you as I have promised. وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ, and me, even me, says Allah, it is me you should fear and no one else. Again, Allah tells us, إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ الَّذِينَ يُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ وَلَا يَنقُضُونَ الْمِيثَاقَ. Those that truly remember, that is, remember that it was Allah who created us and brought us to this earth for no other purpose but to worship Him. Those that remember this, amongst other things, are those who truly have wisdom. Ulul albab. Alladhina yufuna bi ahdillah, they are those who keep their promises with Allah, who fulfill their obligations, their covenants with Allah. وَلَا يَنقُضُونَ الْمِيثَاقَ, and they do not betray or fail to keep the promise. These three ayats or verses of the Quran al-Kareem remind us, amongst other things, that keeping promises, fulfilling obligations, generally is a basic requirement of our deen and of the human life generally, and we shall be held to account by Allah on the day of judgment as to the promises that we have made to Him and we have made to one another. Also, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us directly to fulfill obligations, to keep our promises. And the very reason that He sent to us so large a number of prophets and messengers, 124,000, culminating in our messenger, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to remind us of these obligations. That our obligations or promises towards Him, particularly, must be kept, and it is only Him that we should truly fear. That true love is the love of Allah. A real adoration is our adoration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, it also means that keeping promises and fulfilling obligations are an indication of people with wisdom, people who truly put things in their right perspective and understand the real meaning of life. Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to keep promises and to fulfill obligations, not to betray trusts, covenants? Because, first and foremost, keeping promises is a great virtue, and it is a human value as well as a religious value. And failing to keep promises or failing to fulfill obligations, betraying trust, is, on the other hand, a vice, is evil. It's a sign of evil people. Keeping promises, therefore, and fulfilling obligations could be defined as synonymous or twin brothers of truthfulness and justice. Keeping promises and fulfilling obligations is truthfulness in speech and conformity in action, in behavior, in our deeds. Keeping promises and fulfilling obligations is an integral quality of believers. Every believer is and must be one who keeps his promises and fulfills his or her obligations. Believers, people of wisdom, and indeed it's a sublime human quality and virtue. On the other hand, failing to keep promises or failing to fulfill obligations and betraying trust and agreements and covenants, all of these are qualities of liars, of oppressors, of misguidance and betrayal. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that إِنَّ خِيَارَ عِبَادَ اللَّهِ الْمُوفُونَ الطَّيِّبُونَ, amongst the most select, the best servants of Allah, slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are those who keep their promises and fulfill their obligations and are pure in intention. And he says there are 4 qualities, 4 signs. If found in anybody, then this person is a complete hypocrite. And even if only one of these qualities is found in that person, then they have a quality of hypocrisy until they give it up and change for the better. And these are either when the person is trusted, they betray. When they speak, they tell lies. When they make agreements, they break their agreements. They don't keep their word. And when they fight, and there's a problem between them and anyone, a misunderstanding and disagreement, they fight, they turn to very dirty ways of dealing, slinging mud onto others. And he says, on the day of judgment, a flag of humiliation will be raised above the heads of every betrayer, of every liar, everyone who fails to keep their promises. A flag of humiliation will be raised above their heads so that people will recognize them, condemn them, and know them for the evil persons that they have been. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Yes. Thus we know, first and foremost, fellow believers, that keeping our promises with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we worship Him and obey Him and none else but Him. That is, whatever we do is through our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thus it is an act of worship. What He has commanded, we carry out, and what He has prohibited, we leave completely. We do not disobey Him neither in private nor in public. Secondly, that we are true to our promise of our Prophet and Messenger, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and our love of Him, so that we follow His examples, follow His teachings in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our relationship with Him, and in our relationships with one another. copy his examples, his qualities, his manners, his character in our dealings with all people, believers, Muslims or non-Muslims alike. Thirdly, that we keep our promises and fulfill our obligations between ourselves and all other human beings, believers and disbelievers alike, in our dealings with one another at the material level as well as at the spiritual level. Promises that we make, either in private or in public, agreements that we make, covenants, charters that we sign as individuals or as communities, as nations, all of these fall within this category of the commandment of Allah and the Messenger that we should, as believers, as Muslims, keep promises and fulfill obligations. We pay our debts when we take loans, and we do not take other people's properties unlawfully. We don't squander public funds. We don't indulge in corruption. And we do not betray in any way, form, or shape. In our marriages, in our workplaces, between us and our employers, between us and our countries of origin, between us and our countries of residence, being good and exemplary citizens, all of these come under the requirement to keep promises and to fulfill obligations. Thus we must understand and act upon them as Muslims, as believers, in order for our faith to be complete, and in order for us not to be among those that shall be humiliated on the day of judgment, but those that shall be honored, those upon whose heads flags of honor will be raised to show that this person indeed was one who always kept his promises and fulfilled his obligations. And in the end, we can only remind ourselves and each and everyone again to constantly keep repenting to Allah, imperfect as we are, for repentance sinners shall always be sinners in the sight of Allah. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون احسنه. اللهم ربنا ارنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وارنا يا رب الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم انصرنا وانصر من نصر الدين واجعلنا منهم يا رب العالمين، واخذل يا ربنا من خذل الدين ولا تجعلنا منهم ابدا. اللهم اعز الاسلام والمسلمين وذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر اعداء الدين، وقل رب اغفر وارحم وانت خير الراحمين. اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا هداة مهديين غير ضالين ولا مضلين. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا واعف عنا وعافنا وارزقنا واهدنا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب